Hey everyone, David the AI Guide here. Welcome to session 3 on day 1 of TED full update. First up, Rob Toes, who is a venture capitalist and columnist for Forbes on AI. And by the way, session 3 was titled Autonomy and Dependence, but they mean AI's ability to be autonomous. And what is AI dependent on? That's what that title means. So Rob talked about a single point of failure in AI today, and it's called TSMC. It is the Taiwan chip fab. All of the AI chips in the world are made there in that one place. Why is that a problem? Well, because China has threatened to invade Taiwan, and that fab would be either destroyed during the war or destroyed on purpose to prevent it from falling into the Chinese hands. And what would that mean? Well, the current inventory of AI chips is small, and it would put a global freeze on AI development pretty quickly. So that is huge. So Rob said that semiconductors like the ones used for AI, NVIDIA's chip and others, are the most difficult physical item to make in the entire world. And he said two of the biggest companies, NVIDIA and Qualcomm, are fabless. What does that mean? That means that they design hardware chips and create the software to manage those chips, but they do not make the chips. TSMC does. So the big three chip makers are number one, far and away, TSMC, only one capable of making these very high-end chips. Number two, Samsung, and number three, Intel. He said, just to put this in perspective, TSMC, which most people don't even know about, is the 13th largest company in the entire world. That's how big this company is and how big their chip fab there is. And he said, in chip making, scale matters. In 2021, TSMC alone invested $100 billion into their chip fab in Taiwan. Now think about that. $100 billion is more than the revenue of 98 or 9% of all companies in the world. And that's the investment that they made into their company. He said there's another single point of failure, and that's ASML, the equipment maker that makes the pieces of equipment that can make these extreme chips. But that company is in Europe. So how does this get fixed? He said TSMC is investing $40 billion to build two fabs near each other in Arizona in the US. However, those are still years away. He went on to say that it would take years for Samsung to get where TSMC is now. Samsung, by and large, makes more general chips for phones, computers, stuff like that. And Intel right now is nowhere near where NVIDIA is. They used to be the world leader, they lost it, but now the good news on Intel is TSMC has been making 1 nanometer chips. That's what these very high-end chips are. And Intel has been at 5 nanometer, but they have a new fab coming online next year, 2024. That will be at 2 nanometer, so not where TSMC is, but a lot closer. But long story short, he said, if something happened quickly to TSMC, AI development would essentially stop for several years. So next up was a fascinating woman, Aviv Regev, who is a computational biologist, and she's involved with development of new drugs. So these things that she told the TED group will blow your mind. She said there are 37 trillion cells in the human body. She said DNA decides which cells will be made in the body at any given time. So DNA expresses itself differently to create each different kind of cell. She went on to say, this completely blew my mind, that DNA can express itself in more ways than there are atoms in the entire universe right now. So that blew my mind. She said, so far, cell development has been about quantity, but we want it to move to quality. And she gave an example. There's a company called Microfluidics, which has been identifying about 5,000 cells a decade. It's been doing this for a long time. Now it has identified, thanks to AI, 10 to the 8 cells. So 10 with 8 zeros behind it, cells identified thanks to AI, versus 5,000 a decade. She said basically cells are computational devices. They're complex and non-linear. And then she talked about something they've been working on that's mind-blowing. It's called the lab in a loop. This lab in a loop is basically an autonomous lab to do experiments, fully autonomous. She said they built a small one, but now they're trying to build one at full scale of a commercial research scientific laboratory. She said that this lab in a loop is a wholly new AI model with exceptional predictive ability in terms of predicting which cell will be created by what expression of DNA. She said the number of molecules that exist is insane. It's almost not quantifiable. It's such a big number. She said there are 4 steps to drug discovery. First is identifying the target where the disease can be impacted. Next, discovering the drug that can attach to that target and make a difference. Third, preclinical trials. And then 4th, human clinical trials. She said on average it takes 10 years to develop a drug, and that AI can dramatically accelerate that. She said AI can find the right molecule for the target because the old way of doing things, pre-AI, has a 90% failure rate. She said now we are using generative AI, which is a large language model like ChatGPT or DALL-E 2, to create molecules, some of which were wholly unknown before we created them. She said the key to moving this forward is having diverse data that covers all of humanity. So big stuff there. So the next speaker was Heather Meeker, who is a venture capitalist and lawyer, and her subject was open source AI. So she said, open means licenses are available to anyone for free. She said source means software you are sharing, which is source code, and source code is human readable, versus executable code is only machine readable or computer readable. She said the most successful open source software in history is Linux, which runs a lot of computer programs and also a lot of devices in IoT. So she said, open source AI, what is it? Well, she said machine learning models are trained, not coded. They are not given instructions. They are not software. They are basically statistical models. So she said these are the 3 important things to create OpenAI. First, transparency, that the entire algorithm is fully transparent. The second thing is trust, that the algorithm can be trusted to deliver accurate results. And the final thing is that the algorithm created has social benefit, meaning it does something good for society. And she said this whole idea of open source sharing is very, very powerful. She said it leads to much more innovation than closed source, which is a big tech company holding everything it does to be totally proprietary to itself. So interesting speaker there. Next up, Sarah Guo, who is a venture capitalist and has a fund called Conviction that does startup funding for AI-driven companies. And then she mentioned there's a website or platform called Uplimit that will teach you how to code AI. If you're interested in that, go to Uplimit. There's another one I'll mention shortly. She said AI is at an inflection point. It is capable. It is now just becoming general. Refer to the first video from TED if you want to know what that means. And it's accessible. She said that AI is now starting into a virtuous cycle built on more computing power, more and better data, and more applications developed. Then she talked about some of the companies her fund is invested in. So she mentioned Solo, which is a bot that automates tasks, and check the last video on autonomous agents. Then another company called Pico, which is video from typing. So already existing is video to text, but not text to video. This is new. Then a company called HeyGen, which will teach you to speak any language, even rare ones, supposedly better than the big platforms already out there to learn new languages. Then the next company is really cool. It's called Latent, and it's an algorithm that better understands electronic health record data, making it better quality, more uniform, more easy to be used as a data source for a bunch of different algorithms. So that's huge. Another company called Sequome, which predicts gene sequences. That's obviously going to lead to a lot of breakthroughs in medicine and drug research. So she said, here's the thing that they look for and that really should be the case with AI. She said, you just need to get your AI to a minimum viable quantity, meaning that it works the majority of the time. It's not perfect, just generally works. Will make mistakes. ChatGPT is a great example of that. She said that for AI, it's minimum viable quality versus minimum viable product for a product. And she said there's much higher variability in the cost of a unit, meaning the cost of a particular algorithm versus regular software. So that means that there's huge cost differences between different AIs, and that's much less true now about regular software. She said it's her position that AI is a technology of abundance and that we should reject a scarcity mindset, meaning we shouldn't think it's going to displace a bunch of humans. So next up, Yohei Nakajima, and he is an investor and entrepreneur. He invented something called Baby AGI, Artificial General Intelligence. It's the first successful autonomous agent, he said. And we talked extensively about that last video. He said LLMs now give us the capability to understand extremely complex things. He said the identity of Baby AGI is the more it learns, the more it wants to learn, and the more there is to learn. He said this is a huge shift for society, that society will become much, much more interconnected than it's ever been before. An example of that is self-driving cars, right? All talking to each other, millions of them all over the world. He said an LLM is such a big breakthrough that it represents a new collective consciousness. Not on a par with human collective consciousness yet, but it will get there. He said the best promise of these LLMs is that can be used to bridge divides in society. I certainly hope so. So the next speaker was Harrison Chase, who is an expert in machine learning and ChatGPT. He said, so how do we get from where we are today, almost a year since ChatGPT was released, only 5 or 6 months since GPT-4 was released, how do we get from here to Jarvis? And for those of you who don't know, Jarvis is the fully sentient computer in Iron Man movies. He said the way to get there is to link LLMs to outside other resources. So what does this general intelligence like Jarvis look like? What does it need? He said, first, you give it an instruction prompting. You ask it something. Second, he said, have it output a few shots, not a lot, just a few. Show, don't tell the results. Then he said, the next step after that is retrieval augmented generation, which I'm not 100% sure what that means, but it must mean something like this generalist AI like Jarvis has an exceptional ability to retrieve the correct thing. And then he said constant fine-tuning of the model itself. That gets us to Jarvis. He said this is an engineering problem and it is solvable. For more on AGI, see the TED Session 1 video. So Harrison Chase is also the co-founder and CEO of LangChain, LangChain. So he was talking about this company. What does it do? He said they are trying to build a reasoning machine. He said you start with coding, then you have that code call on an LLM, large language model. Then you create a chain from the output of that and a router to send that information to the proper place in this reasoning machine. And then a machine state, meaning it develops a plan, it executes it, and validates it. And then autonomous agents. So you eliminate what he called scaffolding, was the building of one thing on top of another. So that's what they're trying to get to. This is the cutting edge, these autonomous agents. These will change the world without a doubt. So he said, what are the problems with getting to the end result on this fully autonomous agent? He said, context-aware reasoning, meaning it has to understand the context of the question. It has to be able to trace its process. Data handling is still a problem. They need to work more on the prompt engineering. They need to be really good on evaluation, meaning metrics and building the correct data set. And then collaboration is the last thing needed to get it where it should be. So this is all to say that they're actively working, this company also is actively working on AGI. And the final speaker in this section was a big one. Reid Hoffman, co-founder of LinkedIn, which was sold to Microsoft, and Kevin Scott, who is basically a VC and the CTO of Microsoft AI. So this is two extremely connected, extremely knowledgeable people in AI. So they were talking between the two of them about what were the significant events that brought us to where we are, and then where is everything going. So Kevin Scott said the significant event that brought us to where we are was the founding of OpenAI, which led to ChatGPT and GPT-4. And then Reid Hoffman mentioned Ada Lovelace, who was the first programmer all the way back in the 1800s. I've done a video on that. Check that out. They said that now that LLMs are done, they need a programmer to build a good application using these LLMs. And then Reid Hoffman gave an example of the Pi app, which I did a short on. But the Pi app is basically a personal AI for your journey, he said. So it does a bunch of different things for you. And then Kevin said, well, GPT-4 is huge. He said he first saw GPT-4 in the summer of 2022. He was one of the very first people to look at it. He said it was an aha moment when it passed the AP Bio exam. He said he was completely skeptical about this. And then when he's the one who said, have it pass the AP Bio exam, and it did, he was blown away. He said, to be clear, Kevin Scott said, to be clear, they still don't know how ChatGPT-4 works. Reid Hoffman then said, we need regulation not to slow it, but we need it to focus on cyber terrorism, bioterrorism, and analyzing metrics to make sure it's not being used incorrectly. Then Kevin asked the question, how should these LLMs be deployed? He said there should be a formal mechanism before any new LLM is deployed going forward after ChatGPT and GPT-4. First and foremost, safety. Second, responsibility, meaning accurate results. And third, accountability for the organization releasing it. Agreed with Kevin. Reid then said, AI and creativity is a very interesting intersection. He said what AI should do is amplify, not replace, human creativity. He said that AI is the first major upgrade to the document process since the printing press. So that's hundreds of years ago. That's how big this is. What is the future we're trying to get towards? Reid went on to talk about how ChatGPT wasn't even a serious solution. All they wanted to do was release it to help get data towards building and perfecting GPT-4. And it turned out to be a monster public solution with the most rapid adoption in human history. So that's session 3 on day 1. Big, huge stuff. Lots about AGI. Lots about opportunities for AI in the future, lots about the need for regulation, lots about the need for open source AI. So thanks so much. Please like, subscribe, and share. Share these videos. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye.